To introduce myself, I'm Barkala Robin from World Resources Institute, pretty much doing all the low carbon development and hence doing all the inclusion of the blue carbon progress to the whole modeling system. And I'll be helped today by Ines Ayostina from Conservation International. She's doing blue carbon analysis as well. So looking at the time, I think we might go on to the first presentation. We have Bu Haruni Krisnawati, going to present about incorporating mangrove into national carbon accounting and climate change mitigation actions. I think this is really interesting since last week we have blue carbon mitigation action is included in the RAN GRK and how to see this from a government point of view and how to see this as a whole platform of information of blue carbon. So I would invite Bu Haruni to the stage. Please give a round of applause to Bu Haruni. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Still good morning, everyone. As introduced by Mr. Chairman, I'm Haruni Krisnawati. I am the researcher from the Forest Research and Development Center under the Research, Development and Innovation Agency, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Today, I would like to share about incorporating mangroves into national carbon accounting and climate change mitigation actions. Next, please. First, maybe I would like to provide a brief overview on the facts of mangroves. As we all know that mangroves exist in 118 countries and 70% of them found in just 15 countries. This is based on the record published in GIRI 2010. And Indonesia is the world's largest mangrove with a total area of 3.49 million hectares, or represent 23% of the total world total mangroves area. And mangroves account for 1% of the world's tropical forests, according to the records by UNEP, and about 43 species of tropical mangroves found in Indonesia. This is based on the record by FAO, published in 2006, or represent 80% of tropical mangroves in the world. Mangrove Indonesia itself has been reported to lose about 52,000 hectares each year, or equivalent about 3 football fields each week. This is based on the study by FAO 2017 and report by the Ministry in 2018. Next, please. And why, I think everyone knows that why mangroves are important. This is, mangroves provide numerous ecosystem services, but this is also the most, or among the most vulnerable ecosystem. As we know, we can see on the left side, this is kind of ecosystem services that can be provided by mangrove ecosystem, like protecting shorelines from storm, erosion, tsunami, sea level rise, and also nursery for fish and other animals. Mangroves also maintains the water quality, support livelihood of the communities. The landscape of mangroves can be also provide the ecotourism, but on the other side, mangrove also have exceptionally high carbon stock. As we can see that from the small figure here, the carbon stock stored in mangroves is about 4 times compared with other terrestrial forests. And this ecosystem actually is subject to land use change or conversion to other land use and deforestation. And conversion of mangrove ecosystem to other land use could result in the decrease of in terms of carbon stock and the loss of biodiversity. And this is why this type of ecosystem is very potential for climate change mitigations. Next, please. and how mangroves actually can be incorporated into national carbon accountings. I think everyone knows that mangroves has been put or has been part of the land-based greenhouse gas inventory, and this is the international guidelines IPCC 2013 supplement to the 2006 IPCC guidelines, wetland supplement, and mangroves is part of the Chapter 4 coastal wetlands, in which these guidelines guide how the countries would like to measure, monitor, and report the carbon stock, and then emission and removals. The guidance talking about how we estimate the biomass, dead organic matters, soil carbons. There are also guidance in terms of the choice of methods, the choice of emission and removal factors, choice activity data, and uncertainty assessment. Next, this is two choice of methods under IPCC guidelines in terms of estimating carbon stock. The first one is about the stock difference methods. And we can see on the right, on the side from me, or left side from you, it's actually the carbon stock change are estimated by measuring the carbon stock before and after land use conversion. And the second method is about gain loss methods, which is the stock change method. Stock change are estimated by adding gains and loss. This is two methods that can be chosen by the countries how they can measure, monitor, and report the greenhouse gas emissions, including mangroves as part of the land use sector. Next, please. And this is how Indonesia, official documents has report or incorporates mangrove as part of the national document, especially in the two submitted documents to UNFCCC. The first one is about the AFREL, Forest Reference Emission Level, and the second one is about national NDC, National Determined Contribution, which is based on the result from AFREL calculation as well. The AFREL documents submit about the result of the past activities consists of deforestation and forest degradation, and carbon pool is only focused on the above ground biomass, and the data source that has been used to generate the emission factor is mostly or mainly coming from National Forest Inventory plots data. But for mangroves, because there is no permanent plots or no plots currently exist in the National Forest Inventory network, so we use the research data to fill the gaps. And in the documents, mangrove has been seen as one of the forest types, as part of the land-based greenhouse gas emission reduction activities. And in terms of deforestation and forest degradation activities, the deforestation considered here is the conversion of natural forests, both from primary and secondary forests into land other land use categories. And the forest degradation is just simply the change of primary forests into secondary forest classes. And how we generate emission factor for deforestation. For deforestation, actually, post-deforestation stocks for biomass pool was assumed to be 0. This is the assumption that we use in the preparation of the reporting for national documents. And the emission factor for forest degradation estimated simply from the change of primary forests to secondary forests. So this is the current existing calculations that has been put in the national document reported to UNFCCC, and basically we use the stock difference methods instead of gain loss method. But next please. As we know that we just report about one pools of carbon, which is only above ground biomass. But now, this is a study that has been published 2 or 3 years ago. I'm one of the co-authors in this, led by Pak Daniels. We have about more than 30 sites, I think, around the countries in Indonesia. And as we can see from this study that almost 80% of the carbon in mangrove ecosystem actually stored in soil pools, which is quite a substantial component of the carbon ecosystem carbon stock. And we can see that if we didn't include one of these components, then we may underestimate the carbon storage that has been stored in mangrove ecosystem. And based on this study, we can see the Indonesian mangrove provide high carbon stock, and this could meet the emission reduction, about the quarter of 26% of emission reduction target by 2030 if we conserve mangroves, remaining mangroves from deforestation. Next, please. Yeah, I think this is how, based on the previous study that we presented in the earlier slide, how we actually quantify mangrove carbon stock on the fields. I think some of you may already know, for the researcher that actually have experience in the field side, this is the sampling design of field inventory, how we collect the data for getting the information on the carbon storage for mangrove ecosystem for 5 carbon pools. And of course, field inventory need to be supported by the availability of allometric equation to estimate the tree biomass and carbon stock. Next. Okay, getting the data from field inventory, maybe we can get the information on how much carbon actually stored in mangrove ecosystem. But not just getting the information on how much carbon stored in the ecosystem, but more important thing as well is monitoring changes in mangrove carbon stock. For example, if you can see from this figure here, we have the carbon stock. This is the up there is pre-disturbance carbon stock, which is quite high. And then there is several disturbance events, could be logging, could be fire, could be shrimp pond, and etc. There's also some baby recruits from mangrove plantains. How much carbon loss actually coming from mangroves due to land using, due to deforestation, forest degradation, or other disturbance events, and how much carbon actually accumulated in the ecosystem due to forest growth, regeneration, and reversion. And this is need to have like kind of monitoring the changes of carbon stock. So not just getting the information or measuring carbon stock, but also monitoring the changes. This is much important. This is the area for improvement. Next, please. Yeah.
1 minute, Bu. Thank you.
Yeah, we need to access the initial carbon stock for all selected pools in mangrove and post-disturbance events. And as we know from this figure, the changings of the pools every time is also different, and magnitude of change is also different. Next, please. I will be doing quickly. Sorry. Next, please. Yes. Yeah, this is just too quickly. This is just an example of plot modeling for mangroves for land clearing. It's different initial value of the carbon stock and the magnitude, and the transfer of carbon from one pool to different pool will be vary from before disturbance event and the following disturbance event. Next, please. This is another example for forest degradation, illegal harvesting. The plots is also different. Next, please. Yeah, this is just the example, so just quickly. Sorry, this is a request from Mr. Chairman. Okay, now come up to how mangroves, the role of mangroves for climate change mitigation. I think some of you may already know that. Just speaks to a little bit for the previous slide. Yeah, Indonesian mangroves store about 1/3 of global carbon stock. And for every 1 hectare mangrove forest, it can store 4 times more carbon than terrestrial forest and can absorb 20 times carbon dioxide emission from terrestrial forest. And this is based on the study reported by Harada that planting mangroves with density of 3,000 trees per hectare and with 200 meter width can reduce tsunami risk by 50 to 60%. And tsunami speed by 40. This is this slide is just to show that the mangroves actually can help mitigate climate change by sequestering and storing significant amounts of carbon. Next, there's mainstreaming mangroves into climate change mitigation action. First, increasing mangrove protection and mangrove conservation area, and then rehabilitation and restoration of degraded mangroves, and then including mangrove protection and conservation by avoiding emission into the NDC for emission reduction, and also incentive payments for environmental services for mangrove conservation through REDD+ mechanism or payment environmental service mechanism, etc. Promoting sustainable mangrove management will be one of the options as well, and including, as I presented earlier, including all significant carbon, including soil into national carbon and monitoring system. Next, this is one of the recent publication about the mangrove conservation for climate change mitigation in Indonesia. The summary is about the importance of mangrove conservation in storing and sequestering carbons, and by increasing mangrove conservation area that keep mangroves forests from their conservation to other land use is a part of the greater potential for climate change mitigations. Next, this is just a slide how our ministry have the target in terms of the rehabilitation of degraded mangroves. And this is one of the also for promoting sustainable mangrove management, including communities for involvement and empowerment for mangroves management. Sustainable management means that including not just mangrove inside the design forest area, but also outside. And yeah, come up to the concluding remarks. As we know that mangrove is is an essential ecosystem that highly potential for climate change mitigations. And to be part of the national land-based greenhouse gas emissions reduction activity, information of carbon stock and its dynamic is necessary. And including all significant pools, carbon pools, including soils, and monitoring changes in the mangrove carbon stock should be considered as part of the future improvement in national carbon accounting and reporting for GHG inventory. And for climate change mitigation action, conservation of carbon-rich mangroves should be seen as a high priority component of strategy for climate change to mitigate climate change. And preventing further mangrove loss from deforestation and forest degradation through the policy intervention and incentives that promote mangrove conservation, and promoting sustainable mangrove ecosystem management should be taken into actions. I think that's all that I can share. Next. Yeah, I think the last slide is just thank you, hopefully. Yeah.
Please round of applause for Bu Aruni.
Yeah, this is part of the activity that we planned mangroves in Muara Kembang, Bekasi a few months ago. I think, thank you. Sorry
Thank you.
for very quick of presentation. Because
Yeah.
it's very tough.
So allow me to structure the session full on the presentation sections, and then follow up by a question and answer, because I know that the time is getting quite critical. So Bu Aruni, if you please, we're gonna keep the question. Please jot down your question if you have any, and we're gonna keep it up until the end. And it's gonna be an optional whether you want to go lunch early, since this is the 17th floor. It's an optional you want to see this whole interesting dynamics of mangrove and climate change. So without further ado, I invite you to the stage Naisa Akila. The second speaker is going to talk about carbon storage, both above ground carbon, below ground, temporal analysis on planting, total carbon content, and furthermore. If you could keep it 8 to 10 minutes, that would be great. Thank you.
Check. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's really a big honor for me to be given opportunity to speak in this forum. Well, this is actually a big opportunity for me. And right now, I'm Naisa Akila. I'm an alumni of Universitas Gadjah Mada, and currently I'm working in mapping consultant technologies Indonesia in Yogyakarta. And this research has done by me and my supervisor, Eko Haryono, Dr. Eko Haryono, but unfortunately he cannot come to this forum. We are from Environmental Geography Department, University of Mada. So the introduction of this research, as we know that the change of some amount of certain gases, as we know as greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, leads to global warming phenomenon. Well, global warming is not an issue, but it's the phenomenon that we have been facing these recent years. And what we have a thing that can tackle global warming. It's a forest. The forest have ecological role as carbon absorber and also carbon sink. And mangrove is a kind of forest type that can sink carbon as much as 4 until 112 gigaton carbon per year. And carbon trade scheme developed to nurture the sustainability of carbon sources. As we know that the mangrove forest land conversion and the deforestation has degraded the role of the forest. So there are carbon trade schemes that integrating with blue carbon financing to develop, it's developed to nurture the sustainability of carbon sources. And from that point, as the carbon sources, we found that Pasar Banggi mangrove forest has already developed, and similar to primary mangrove forest, it's one of mangrove forests in Central Java that has already developed. So we want to know how much the carbon storage in this mangrove forest. Okay, the next slide. And the aims of this research, one is to measure the carbon storage in the mangrove forest from the surface, roots, and also from the mud substrate in each year of planting. We know that a tree has a carbon source. It's from the roots, it's from the branch, it's from the above ground, it's from the below ground, and also from the soil. So in this mangrove forest, we want to know how much the carbon storage from the surface, roots, and mud substrate. And the second, we want to indicate the total carbon and CO2 or carbon dioxide content in each year of planting. And the last is we want to know the economic value of carbon from Pasar Banggi mangrove forest. Next slide. And the methods we used in this research. First, the methods of collecting data. At first, we observed from Google Earth imagery, we used imagery, and then we had a field observation, of course, and we interviewed the mangrove community there. And from that, we know the planting year zonation and wide area determination. So in this research, we divide the mangrove forest into 4 planting years because the different planting years has different carbon stock. And then we collecting sample by making measuring plot as wide as 100 meters square, size along the near shore and the near flatland. So we take sample from the near land and from the near shore. The data we get, there are 4 main data. The first is vegetation density and composition. We identify each mangrove species in each plot. And the second, we get the data about above ground and below ground mass. We get it from by using non-destructive sampling. It means we don't harvest the tree, but we only measure the dBH of trees measurement. It's diameter base height of the trees. And then we get mud substrate carbon. We take distributed sampling and distributed sampling collection. And then for the economic value of carbon, we used the price from ecosystem marketplace. So actually this is one of the implementation to measure the carbon stock from what Ibu Haruni explained before. And next, and this is, sorry for the map, is still in Bahasa. Well, this is the sample point, the sample map. We take the sample from each plot that we cover in this picture. So this is the plot that we take. It's near the shore. Near the shore is in the yellow point, and the green one is the near land. Next. And this is the methods of processing data. After we collect the data, we process the data. The first, vegetation density and composition, we use formula by as what I share in this slide. And the second, above ground and below ground biomass. We used equation, allometric equation by Komiyama et al. It's developed from 2005. This equation is applied to calculate the biomass as follow: above ground biomass and below ground biomass. And the formula is just approach from the wood density. The wood density is the wood density for each mangrove species, because between one mangrove species and between one and another has different wood density. And then we we also use the diameter base at high. After that, for mud substrate carbon, we used for distributive sampling. Distributive sampling is the mud that we only take it in the surface of the mud, and it's tested in laboratory by using Wolke and Black methods. and to get the C organic or carbon organic. It's carbon organic is a carbon that stored in the mud substrate of mangroves. And second is undisturbed sampling. Undisturbed sampling is measured or it's taken with ring sample, and it's tested with bulk density measurement in the laboratory also. For measure the mud substrate carbon, we use we have to know the C carbon, and we have to know the amount of bulk density. And then the last is economic value. This is for CO2 or carbon dioxide storage measurement, and then we converting the economic value of CO2 into EDR or into rupiah. And this is the picture of taking sample and laboratory activity. Next. This is the flow chart, but I think we just have to skip this. Okay. Next, this is the area of study. Why we choose Rembang? Why we choose Pasar Banjir? But I want to introduce you about the Rembang. Rembang is one of district in Central Java. It has unique topography and landscape. In the southern area, it has mountainous and hills topography. But in the northern area, it has mountainous but also tidal flat or alluvial flat. And the northern area, it is a coastal region that people usually call as Pantura. And this Pantura is a terrain area in the northern that has alluvial plain and has strongly coastal activities such as sedimentation. Next. The sedimentation the sedimentation process occurs due to huge sediment materials and stream flow that have role as main factors of sandy and muddy beach formation. This sandy and muddy beach formation is good for mangrove development, for mangrove growth. And this is the area of study. It's mangrove rehabilitation forest that located in Dukuh Kaliuntu, Desa Pasar Banjir, Rembang, Jawa Tengah. Next. Okay, this is the result of the research. Well, in this forest, there are 4 species mangrove. There are Rhizophora apiculata, Rhizophora mucrata, Rhizophora stiosa, Soneracea alba, and Avicennia. Well, in this rehabilitation forest, there is no transition zone between brackish forest and land, which mainly Nipah, Furtikan located. So the land is dominated by fish ponds, site right after the mangrove forest, and always spread by natural embankment from soil. So this is not a perfect mangrove forest actually, because there's no transition zone between the land and between mangrove forest. And the Soneracea alba species in this forest is only a few because it's not growth well in this mangrove forest. Next. Well, this is the picture. Okay. This is the picture of the mangrove forest. Next. Okay, this is, we just go to the result. This is the density of mangroves, and this is the above ground carbon density. The oldest, there are 4 planting years. This is from 1970, and then this is the below ground. The previous one is from above ground biomass, and this is the below ground carbon density. The below ground carbon density, the oldest planting year, has the highest carbon stock. Next. And this is the mud substrate carbon. This is the C organic. This C organic, the highest one is from the oldest planting year, but the not so older planting year has more lower than the younger one. It's because the texture of the substrate of the mud substrate. If the texture is coarse or sandy, it has the lower C organic. Next. This is the bulk density. Well, in the planting year 1970 until 1990, it has the highest bulk density. It because the texture of the sandy substrate. Next. And this is the mud substrate carbon density, the total mud substrate. The various substrate, the different mud substrate carbon content in each year of planting is influenced by the substrate depth, area of the planting year, bulk density, and the sea organic. There are 4 factors that can influence the mud substrate in mangrove forest. Next. Okay, this is the density carbon map. We know that from this map that the oldest planting year has the highest carbon stock, but the youngest one is not having the lowest carbon stock because it has the wide area, and also the depth of the substrate is also higher than the oldest one. Next. And this is the proportion. As what recent research done, that the mud substrate in a mangrove forest has contributed the most carbon rather than the other, rather than below ground carbon and rather than above ground carbon. So the mud substrate carbon contributes the highest carbon sink than the other. Next. Next. Okay, this is the CO2 storage. So from the carbon stock, we can convert it into the carbon dioxide content. And this is the CO2 storage that has in mangrove forest Pasar Banggi. The highest one is from the oldest planting year. Next. Okay, this is the carbon economic value. So from the storage, from the carbon dioxide that has storage in this mangrove forest, we can know how much the economic value of this mangrove forest. And this is the total amount. There are 73 million rupiahs, and the planting year, which has the highest CO2 storage, has the highest economic value, and vice versa. But we know that this is for academic, actually this research has done for academical purposes, so it's not always can be implemented in every mangrove forest. But the point that we want to underline in this research is that we still have to determine what method that we have to use in every mangrove forest carbon stock. And this economic value is not implemented in this mangrove forest because the community mangrove forest in Pasar Banggi is still plain forest for ecological purposes, just like to reduce the abrasion and to protect their fish ponds. So they didn't know that their mangrove forest is a reserve for carbon storage. And the last, okay, this is the conclusion. Well, this is what we want to conclusion, that the mangrove forest in Pasar Banggi has big roles for carbon storage, and it's an asset for blue carbon financing, I think. And the economic value can be derived not only from the carbon, but also from other benefits of mangrove forest, such as from the wood, the leaves, fruits, and the tourism activity in this mangrove forest. Okay, this and last slide is, I would really like to say thank you for concerning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Naisa. If you please have a seat. Please do keep the question up until the end of the session, because we're going to have hopefully interactive discussion with the speakers. So as we can see, the sequestration rate is a friend of time, but I think time is not a friend of an event. And you can really see the relation of listening to rap music to presentations. We have to do it quite concisely. I want to invite the next speaker, Mr. Agustinus Castaña. He's going to talk much about the distribution, the correlation between local level measurements and NDCs. So this is really interesting to see the connection from top to bottom to top. Please, the time is your spot.
Thank you. I'm Agustinus Castagna and Felipus Castagna, Patimura University and Polytechnic pada Maratobelo. I want to explain about, with Indonesian language for it is good. Next. Pokok-pokok presentasi adalah introduction, material and method, result and discussion, conclusion and recommendation. Di Maluku adalah pulau-pulau kecil dan
determine contributions and also the implementation strategy in order to implement NDC, and Maluku has developed a roadmap on mitigation and adaptation, and for now also carry out the action plan for supporting NDC. Maluku has a very vast ocean or sea area, which consists of 92% and land of 8%. Therefore, it has a very high potential for blue carbon. But now the condition is degrading, and also the coastline is around 10,000 kilometers. Mangrove here plays a very important role for small island, but mangrove nowadays suffer from this degrading condition, which takes or require our attention. This is the map of the island. So our research center so first there are 12 islands, and the analysis is conducted using the overlapping or using the Landsats, and it is centered in each island. And then beforehand, we have tried to set up a analysis scheme to manage this small island, which based on green economy and also blue economy. And also landscape and seascape. And by trying to set all these factors, social, economy factors, in order to be able to establish the development indicators that can preserve the whole ecosystem in the small island, conserve the biodiversity, including the natural resources, the forest resources, the sea resources, and we try to mainstream all these mitigations and adaptations effort. And based on this research, we try to integrate all the existing planning there. So all the efforts on the land can be focused on the watershed element, and we're trying to integrate all data and information concerning mangrove into the system so that it can support the local action plan for supporting the NDC. So in particular, out of all the integration effort, the interpretation then focus are concentrated on the mangrove areas. And the result that we generated, based on that, we try to interpret the result of covering all the mangrove areas across these small islands, and we try to identify which still has the total or good coverage, and identify which part that has not yet or suffering from the degrading condition. And the total mangrove areas now left with 228,772. The area of primary mangrove only consists now with 31.02%, and the secondary 68.02%. So the remaining mangrove areas or mangrove coverage now only consists of 68%. So this area is distributed over 11 island clusters, as I showed to you. And only one island has no mangrove area anymore, and it has a great impact to small island. So as part of the impact of the climate change, the rise of sea level, there will be a huge abrasion impact as well. So in general, so this is the result that we generated from these 12 islands. And this one is the result of analysis. This is the first island clusters, where all planning in Maluku has been integrated. We concentrated on the water set, and so if you see these red circles, it means it indicates the mangrove areas. But again, if we take a look at this in overall, there are smaller spots located along the coast area where it no longer has the mangrove, which means it already suffering from this terrible degradation. And this one is the second cluster. Just next, this is the third cluster. Cluster 4, cluster 5, and cluster 6, and cluster 7 in Ambon, around Ambon City, and also Lease. It also suffers from degradation, and this one is the cluster number 8, this one number 9. And this is located in Aru Island, which still has quite coverage over here, but still in Maluku we suffer from huge problem in terms of the national planning, especially in forest special planning, where almost 84% consists of the forest converted area, and this amount of area almost being converted to the cane plantation. But thankfully we were able to prevent that, otherwise we would be having a huge disaster. But this one, in this cluster, we still have the mangrove areas. This one is a cluster 10. Cluster 11, where it no longer has the mangrove areas, and I think we need to pay attention to this area. This is cluster 12. Next. So I think this is the conclusion. And the conclusion is that the remaining mangrove areas is distributed over 11 island clusters, and we need to conserve this. And I think in developing Maluku's area, I don't think We should not just see mangrove as the service provider to absorb carbon, but also its function to provide the livelihood for the local community and also to maintain the existence of this small island. So based on our result, we then at least have an tentative or indicative maps how we can develop mangrove areas in the future. And if we want to secure or if we want to support NDC as our development focus, so the economic base that we need to proceed is blue and green economy. And meanwhile, the change process that happens in Maluku, well, we try to integrate all of landscape and seascape into one integral part in the development of small island. So in addition to support the NDC, but also to support the SDG program. That's all. Thank you.
Terima kasih Bapak. Silakan. Thank you Pak Agustinus. This is really interesting because we could really see from the local level and we could see how it will affect the sustainable development planning and also coordinating with the ministries from a local level point of view. Just to cut some more time, please let me invite the next speaker is a good friend of mine, Sigit Denisasmito. Going to talk about global analysis of mangrove blue carbon stock change across disturbance regimes.
Hi everyone. So my name is Sigit Denisasmito. So I'm a currently PhD candidate in Charles Darwin University in Riau and also PhD fellow in CIFOR with the SWARM project. Today I will present one of my chapter in my PhD thesis entitled Global Analysis of Mangrove Blue Carbon Stock Change Across Disturbance Regimes. So this is a systematic review studies and pick up the global analysis. If you learn or see the presentation from Bu Haruni recently, this is similar, but instead of collecting field data, we collect the data, secondary data from the published literature. Next. So actually, the research about mangrove and carbon started in '92, a long time ago, 3 decades since now, but in 2008, there's a publication by Bullion et al. Highlighting the importance of mangrove production and carbon sink and review all of the published literature as well. Next. So in 2011, the mangrove carbon research came up and then included in the blue carbon in addition with the seagrass and saltmarsh. And next. And in 2015, we published on the potential of Indonesian mangrove for national climate change mitigation. And recently, the similar article on nature climate change on global control carbon storage in the mangrove soil. Why soil? Because of soil carbon pool store huge amount of carbon stock. And then global stock and potential emission due to mangrove deforestation in the last decade. And next, so with the mangrove and carbon background, here is the global picture of the carbon budget in our Earth. And specifically in here, I want to discuss on the mangrove and how role mangrove ecosystem in this part of the global carbon budget, especially on the lensing and land use change sectors. Next. So in 2016, we have seen that the use of mangrove deforestation rates in Southeast Asia in the last few years. But mostly based on the due to the aquaculture, the rice field, oil palm, and other drivers. And in Indonesia itself, we have a lot of aquaculture expansion into the mangrove ecosystem, and also in Sumatra, growing of oil palm into the mangrove ecosystem. Next. So at the same time, we develop a protocol how to conduct systematic review that related to quantify or asking a question, how does disturbance regimes affect carbon stock and fluxes in the mangrove ecosystem, with a specific, two specific research questions. What data are available on the stock and fluxes in relation to the anthropogenic natural disturbance activities, and what is the magnitude of a carbon stock and flux change as a function of disturbance transition. Next. So how to collect the data from the literature? We define the scope of the study. We call it the PICO, Population, Intervention, Comparator, and Outcome. The population is mangroves, and the intervention is different disturbance regimes, land use change, and pollution and things. And comparator is undisturbed versus disturbed sampling sites, basically. And the outcome is carbon, either carbon stock or flux. But in my presentation currently, I just present the result from carbon stocks. So we got nearly 5,000 titles of our publication related with this, related with this search string that we developed based on the PICO, and then near down based on the screening, title screening, abstract screening, critical appraisal, and finally we have nearly 500 full text and 40 of them for systematic review relevant based on our study design, and we have 154 data set for meta-analysis. Next. So here is the classification that we identified from the population of the literature that we collected from many databases. So we have abundant fish ponds and until pollution. So basically we define the disturbance regimes into two. The one that are anthropogenically driven, and then another one is naturally driven. And we have several anthropogenic drivers of causing mangrove degradation, including aquaculture, agriculture, forest management, urban pollution. And the natural, we have a dieback. We have recently a large mangrove dieback in the Northern Territory. And there's also a mangrove colonization into the submerged ecosystem in the North America, South Australia, and also in Africa. Next. So here is the data population, the distribution across the world, defining by carbon flux study and carbon stock studies, and both. So we have several data from Southeast Asia and America, but less data from Africa. Next. So here is the number of studies year by year since '93 until now. So mangrove and carbon are getting popular, right? So we have increasing very in the last 2 years, in 2016 and 17. Next. So this is the one that we have been discussing like since yesterday. How much the change of carbon stocks due to the disturbance. So this is our preliminary result. We pick up or classify it into the 3 carbon pools: above ground biomass carbon, below ground biomass carbon, and soil carbon. And for the above ground biomass carbon, we have negative and positive percentage of change in terms of the carbon stocks, especially from colonization, forest management, and aquaculture conversion. Some of the blank data, meaning that not available data for this disturbance regimes. We have very poor data population as well for below ground biomass carbon for colonization with huge uncertainty. And the important is the soil one. So we have several trend here. So you can see the colonization affect positive in terms of the carbon stock change after several years, and then we have a negative impact of carbon stock due to the anthropogenic, especially anthropogenic disturbance regime. Next. So this is also interesting. Sorry, I don't have a pointer, but you can see that some of the data show that, for example, in the above ground biomass carbon, we have increasing trend of carbon change since time. Time since disturbance. Like for example, it is 70 years after mangrove colonization into submerged ecosystems. And for example, here we have aquaculture. There is a decreasing raw main difference means carbon stock change across the time series. So here is the below ground biomass data, and then next, this is the soil carbon as well. So the same trend also for colonization, mangrove colonization to submerged, and then the same trend with the significant loss of carbon stock due to the aquaculture expansion into mangrove. Next. So we have been doing this since the last 2 years, and we have like very frustrating works, and we face many challenges here. So these are collaborative works and very long processes and very time consuming, because we have to read a paper one by one and collect the data one by one. And then all of the studies provide diverse variables and very limited data still. For example, there are some papers that not presenting data by using the standard unit for carbon. For example, like carbon stock, usually we use the ton carbon per hectare, but other paper might be not using that one. And then there's also very limited information regarding the statistical size. For example, some papers are not presenting the standard deviation or the number of the sampling, which is very, very important for publication. And language limitation, so we just only include the English written studies or publication. So maybe some of Indonesian or Bahasa Indonesia, we know that assess the same study design not be included here. And the consistency, so it's already 2 years, and we have to maintain our energy of consistency, like using the same method and read the papers like one by one. Next. So we identified the impact of mangrove carbon storage and fluxes. We have another data on fluxes to disturbance regimes in the mangrove ecosystem, and we acknowledge that systematic review requires transparent and consistency steps. Mangrove conversion to other land uses may lead to carbon emission, while conservation-based activities have carbon gain. For example, here we have some data on the forest management, where actually some activities like forest logging and also restoration included there. So we highlight that we need more and more field data. So next. Thank you. We just finished our field work last week in Bintuni Bay. So thank you for attention.
Thank you, Sid, for your presentation. It's really interesting to see how this could be in science and evidence-based to push the other working group that we heard yesterday, the policy, financing, and everything based on what we are finding in the science communities. So moving on to the next speaker, I would invite Pak Muhammad Muryono. Is going to talk much about rhizophora, allometric models, and this and that. Please.
Oke, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Actually, I'm still foolish for blue carbon, and also I met many senpai and sensei here, so it is, until now I'm still encouraged how to interpret, mostly common people, how to understand about mangrove. So approaching about allometric model of CIFOR in Madura Island is Java. Maybe everyone known about allometric, Rhizopora stilosa also, but I want tiny concern about what kind of thing that we have to concern for the data of allometric. Next. So probably just nice to know that now we're dealing with some data about the ecophysiology modeling of terrestrial and marine ecosystem and CO2 elevated, especially for photosynthesis, plant response, and also assessment of climate change impacts. Next. So what we have dealing in ITS or our group for ecology is, in previous we have modeling and sensitivity analysis of canopy photosynthesis, similar with CO2, increasing, and then we try to modelize how plant respond. And in the present, we dealing with the end distribution of salinity rise, because of course previously said that above sea level, and then the salinity now is increasing, especially for plantation in coastal or near the sea. And then the last, probably in Indonesia, we also develop kind of way to understand about conservation in mangrove, because we have herbivore, so thing that we have to concern, and also enrichment in mangrove forest. We already know, because mangrove is mostly is given area, it's not planted or artificially. Next. So in previous journal I also mentioned, but I want to make concern about Indonesian issue. In the last paper in Nature mentioned about 50% and more than 30% in Indonesia. And of course, we have the high rank according for this paper. Next. But my concern is about 2 carbon storage proportional to mangrove forest biomass, because I don't know, when I searching and I found FAO in 1985, they have represented Irian is the highest distribution mangrove in Indonesia, and we found a very newest paper for global distribution of mangrove ecosystem carbon stock per pool. Indonesia and specifically Papua is the highest. So this data is began in 1985 to 2018. The trend is similar. So sometimes we think why we have to make very difficult to measure for the stock carbon if we can assume from distribution of mangrove. So that's why I raise a question, do carbon storage proportional to mangrove forest biomass? Next. And also in that paper have simulation or metadata for many approaching for measuring carbon stock. The point is the consistent in the below ground and following with the middle one. And I'm interested in above ground stock. They have different amount, but maybe small, but it's interesting for me to recognize why this one is different, because plant physiology is different. Mangrove already said, because it's close to the ecotone area, so many tied or something with the people. So we want to make sure that why does above ground stock have a different amount for counting. Next. So allometric, basically equation to estimating tree biomass, and then measured parameter, especially diameter, brace height, regress again harvested, 3 component weight, and then The objective of this question, the objective of this presentation is assessment of carbon storage by estimating tree and biomass and also necromass. Compare above ground biomass and carbon stock. Next. Okay, this one probably already been known from previous presentation. We have Rhizophora stellosa, but we split it into trees, fruit, root, and litter. Maybe fruit is not, so we specifically in trees, roots, and litters. Next. This one is our location of sampling. Next, in Madura Island. Probably it's already been known also, biomass measurement. So we have template for high tide and low tide, I mean close or for the sea. Next, this one is also like a tailor, so we just manually, very conservative, so we using biomass for diameter plus height. Next, this one is also already known. Well, next, probably the material we conduct, of course, we analyze kind of method, data with ANOVA and also examine the latest important thing about sea stock with multiple regression. Next, so the result of this analysis is the first one is a main tree had a carbon storage proportional with the biomass. Woody necromass. Necromass is dead tree, so woody. So it's say woody necromass had carbon storage not proportional to biomass, and high tide site had higher biomass in main tree and woody necromass. Also higher carbon stock in main tree and woody necromass. This can be displayed next. And then about the roots had carbon storage proportional also. Low tide set had higher biomass and carbon stock. Next. And litter have proportional with the biomass. High tide set had higher biomass and carbon stock. Next. And for multiple regression, we found that root biomass had a significant correlation on root carbon and litter carbon. Litter biomass had significant correlated on litter carbon stock. And the last one is root carbon has significant correlated on litter carbon. So this display for multiple regression. Next, about low tide, the tree biomass had significant correlated on root carbon. Litter biomass had significant correlated on litter carbon. Next. So we assume that do carbon storage proportional to mangrove forest biomass? So the answer is yes. No, only one, woody necromass, had not proportional with biomass. So probably something very specifically with the location. The other is significant correlated biomass is proportional with the carbon stock. Next. And the last question is why does above ground stock have different amount of data? So the root and litter biomass effect on root carbon at high tide site, tree biomass effect on root carbon at low tide site. So depend on the location of the sampling. Also assume that we can diverse for the data. Next. So the conclusion is about above ground carbon stock is one is proportional with the biomass mostly, and high tide set was higher in tree carbon stock, and above ground carbon stock influenced by sea tide, high versus low, but this modest significant correlation was attributed mainly to the above ground biomass. And next, okay, thank you, and I'm very thank you for all of this audience, and we are welcome if you came to Surabaya. Do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. It's quite interesting when we all emphasizing much on the below ground carbon, and this emphasize more on the above ground and all the measurements involved. Please allow me to steal your lunchtime a bit more. I would invite Bambang Ariftami. He's going to talk about estimating carbon sequestration, GHG emission, coastal blue carbon project using FAO exact tool. So this is really interesting.
Okay, thank you, Mas Bara. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Bambang Arifatmi. I'm working as a national consultant, especially in the forestry at FAO Jakarta. Today, my presentation is about the greenhouse gas accounting tools for blue carbon. I'm going to talk first about the background. You know, the exact is developed in 2009 in collaboration between FAO, World Bank, and also IRD. Exact itself is a ex-ante carbon balance tool, can be used at different steps of the project cycle. So you can use the exact to measure the baseline and also in the middle of your project, and also ex post analysis. Ex ante, the exact also estimate the mitigation impact of agriculture and forestry planning, policy, and also investment project. So you can see from the slide, more than 250 projects from different partner analysis using the exact, such as IFAD, USAID, World Bank. All the project has a portfolio of $4.8 billion US. And then let me give you explanation a little bit about exact. Can you back, please? Okay, go ahead. Okay, next slide. Okay, exact is an Excel-based tool to quantify the amount of GHGs release of sequestered from the activity in the aquaculture sector, including the blue carbon, fisheries, and aquaculture. In exact, you need activities data on agriculture practices, and also you need what kind of resources will be used, and then also what kind of land use change you have it, or you find it in the field. And then the currency we use in exact is in ton of CO2 equivalents. Next, please. So I'm talking about the what can be important from the exact. Exact itself, lead policy officer and also project designer to elaborate two different development scenario from the aquaculture sector. So the first one, as a business as usual, right? It means in another word, this the project without intervention. And the second one, a policy of project scenario. In other words, I'm put this one about the strengthening target and sustainable development. This with the intervention. Next. Okay. So the main logic of exact. Next, please. Okay, next. Okay. The main logic of exact is take into account activity that impact GHG flux, right? Or stock change from two different carbon pools. So the activity can be from deforestation, forest degradation, restoration, and so on. And the impact of the GHG flux you can measure here. It's like CO2, methane, and also N2O. And then you also can measure the stock change from the different carbon pool. It's above ground biomass, below ground biomass, soil, litter, and dead wood. It's almost the same thing what Ibu Haruni explained earlier. So combining between GHG emission and carbon stock change, so you can get what we call the carbon balance in ton of CO2 equivalent. After you are running the system, you get the positive result. What's mean the positive result is? There are more emission. So the project's not really good. So you need to think about what kind of activity you should adjust for the project. But if you get the negative result, there are less emission. That make you happy. You can see the picture, the emotion there. So from there, you can determine what kind of mitigation step should be incorporated in the project activity. Next, please. Okay, next. So the methodology behind the tools is based on the IPCC 2014 for the blue carbon, and then 2006 for greenhouse gases. So really important, especially for blue carbon community, given there is a high degree of incertitude of mangrove carbon stock. EXAC is using Tier 1 data for gas emission computation, but it also allows users to use their own coefficient or carbon stock data. So if you have emission factor in Tier 2, you can plug in EXAC as well. Okay, next. Okay, next. Next. Okay, more specifically on blue carbon. So right now, our team in Rome, they are working right now to develop the peer review in 2015, together with marine fisheries and aquaculture model. So this what you can get from EXAC, right? The first one, forest management practices. The second one, extraction. Soil is extracted over 1 meter depth. And also drainage. Water table is changed to 1 meter depth. This is 3 components with the different activities over there that you can use to calculate gas emission using EXAC. Next. And then the EXAC focus you can use to measure a full sector, including livestock. And the second one, coastal wetland. It means the blue carbon. The third one is the fisheries in aquaculture. That's why I'm really strong you to use these tools, because you can see in the big picture, because when you manage the lands based on the landscape approach, so you need to know how much carbon, from the upstream to downstream, and then to the, also in the reef. So with EXAC, you can use easily, user-friendly, because Excel, you have it in your computer, and then you get faster result, right? This, to put it simply, is it important, for, regional officer in the province Indonesia or decision maker? You can use this, easily, and then you can, and after that you can determine what kind the project you want to choose. Okay, so or you can choose a part of the landscape. Maybe you just choose in the middle, or just in the coastal area. Okay, next. So let's me talk about a little bit the project what have been done with FL. The first one, this about aquaculture development in Mozambique, and the second one, adaptation to salinity intrusion in the Mekong Delta, wetland conservation in Gabon, integrated mangrove, and the last one, mangrove resource in India. Also together with fisheries development project. So if you need more information on what kind of project we have, you can check with this link. Next. Okay, this one project in the Mekong Delta, this delta have a problem with the salinity intrusion up to 60 kilometers in the land. Can you imagine what's going on, right? And then we use to kind of approach the first one, improving water resources management for rice and fruit horticulture, and the second one, supporting agricultural aquaculture system adaptive and resilient to salination intrusion, right? So next, so you know, this project covered like 100,000 hectare, right? But you know, you can check in the table, mangrove area only 19% of the total area, but this project take care to restore it, right? And then you can check from them, using the mangrove area activity, you can get the carbon back about 8 million ton CO2 equivalent. So you can imagine only 19% from the total area mangrove you restore, so you can get the 8 million ton CO2 equivalent. Next, this another you know, project that we have also. Maybe go next, please. Okay, this what happened in the Vietnam, right? In the Vietnam, we have also the project related what is the effect the integrated mangrove shrimp farm on GHG emission. The policy question is how we can reconcile shrimp aquaculture and blue carbon conservation, right? Now, from the table, you can see, you know, this project, they try to restore the mangrove double from 2,000 become 4,000. But why we get the less number of the emissions there? Because the community, they break the law. The mangrove survive should be 60% ratio, but they break, you know, based on the Oracle questionnaire, the community, they break the law, they don't comply with the regulation, and then that's why. So, what the strong policy message on this project? With the project, you know, farmer should respect mangrove ratio 6 to 40%, right? Because they break the law, even they double the area restoration, but still not cover the emission coming from pond construction. Next. Okay, thank you for your attention. If you have any question, you can, you know, contact Lori Sophie, our college in Rome, and also myself there. Thank you.
Thank you, but I would invite Masigit to go upstairs. Looking at the time, we have 4 to 5 minutes for question and answer, but I would still encourage for you to have some question. I would limit to 2 to 3 concise questions, if I may, please. Yeah, Bapak, Mas Novi, another one probably.
Okay, questions?
Going once, going twice, 3. Okay, so 3 questions. Please help us to keep the time and keep it really concise. But
Terima kasih.
Thank you. Arif Basori from LPDS.
This is for Ibu Haruni Krishnawati. I also welcome the other panelists to give a response to 3 short questions to Ibu Haruni. First, I'd like to reconnect to the previous session with Pak Emil Salim and Pak Daniel was the moderator. It's on mangrove management. And no, it's on mangrove policy. Now, Indonesia has 7 lines of climate-related policy, going first from 2011 with the National Action Plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, RANGRK. And then we have the forest moratorium, and we have the merger of the two ministries in 2015. And the most recent came out in March 2018, the Electricity Supply Business Plan 2018. This is the RUPTL, whereby the energy mix is dominated by coal, over 50% going into 2025. So my question to you, Ibu Haruni, when we discuss about having a mangrove policy as was raised in the previous session, what should go into a climate-related policy on mangrove restoration and development? First question. Second question is... All right.
Thank you, Pak. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is directed to Mbak Haruni, and just a few one, and a quick comment to Pak Bambang from the EXAC. For Mbak Haruni, so you refer to the wetland supplement of the IPCC. So how far it is fully implemented for Indonesia? Because the supplement, as far as I know, focus on the soil and below ground. So has it been fully implemented for Indonesia? And if it's not, then is there any plan to, what is the plan to have a full implementation of these wetlands? And then the second question still, are all mangrove area covered by this wetland supplement for Indonesia? For example, a mangrove area, as explained by our colleague from Ambon, those are island mangrove. So are those mangrove in areas included in the inventory as well? And for Pak Bambang, so yes, we have used this EXAC tool to, for example, we use it for our study case in Bekasi, Muara Gembong, where there is a mangrove conversion to fish pond, but there is also like a marine reserve area is under review to be implemented. But we think that it will be complementary if we use also like the tool with a spatial, spatial display. So we also complement this EXAC tool with other tool that explicitly spatial, for example, InFES. So we know where the carbon sink or emissions is the highest and the lowest spatially, because the EXAC tool is a table-like method. We don't know where is the variation of this carbon dynamics. For example. Just a quick comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Tami Putri. I represent the Biodiversity Consultancy. So we're consultants, and we work a lot with the private sector, trying to make sustainability works on the ground. So I just have one question, because you guys talk a lot about, we have to have sustainable management of coastal ecosystems, and then Papua or Indonesia has such large carbon stock amount. So I would like just to get your tea, I guess, on what do you think, or what would be your advice on how we can make this sustainable management of coastal ecosystem work in Indonesia. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Since Mas Novi is cheating on a number of questions, and the question is quite long, I would stick to the yes or no answers. No, I'm actually joking. Silakan.
Thank you. Apologies if maybe I could not be able to catch the question correctly from the first question. Yeah. maybe, Mas Bara, could you, I can respond to the second question first. Yeah, I'm trying to my best to respond your question related with how is mangrove actually has been incorporated or has been included in the reportings in terms of National Action Plan for Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction, something like this. Yeah. If
He's not using his microphone, so I'm sorry there would be no translation.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not in the position, I'm a researcher, I'm not in the position maybe to respond from the policy point of view, but yes, yeah. Okay, yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, I think under the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, there are, I think, 2 directorates which actually related directly with, especially with the blue carbon, especially with mangrove, which is one in the Directorate General of Watershed Management, which is under directorates, if I'm not mistaken, is about the soil and soil conservation, which is mostly related dealing with the land rehabilitation, including mangroves, especially rehabilitation for degraded mangroves. And the other one is under the Directorate General of Natural Resource Conservation and Ecosystem, one of the directorate dealing with the essential ecosystem management. One of the issue that has been handled is related with wetland, including mangroves. So I think within our ministry when I'm working on has just been put some responsibility related, especially related with rehabilitation and conservation. In terms of the research and development and innovation agency, I think we have some research group who are actually also working on the blue carbon issues, especially for mangrove, because initially we work for the forestry before merging with the Ministry of Environment. So most of the work that we have been done dealing with blue carbon mangroves especially. And of course now I think with in close collaboration with colleagues from Ministry of Marines, Fisheries, Marines, and Ministry of Planning Agency, Maritimes as well. From the scientific point of view, we have been working how we can, as maybe Mas Novi ever said in the previous session, how the science can be work together with the policy, with the working through the regulation or policy issues, something like that. And I think recently, maybe Mas Novi, you could update what's going on under the Ministry of Planning Agency. We actually set up the strategy in terms of the blue carbon policy and strategy framework or something like that. Yeah, which has been working, I think, in collaboration within the planning agency, Ministry of coordinating for Maritime, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and Marine and Fishery. Yeah, this what I can respond, but I'm happy to discuss further after the session if it is related with something that I know. Yeah, the second thing I would like to respond the question from Mas Novi in terms of implementing the wetland supplement 2000 or 14, wetland supplement. Yes, I think what I have presented in my slide is related with when we prepare the national document for forest reference emission level, and then this result has been used in setting for land-based sector for NDC documents. Yes, wetland supplement mostly has been used as a source of emission, especially for wetland, which is peatland. That has been good. But for mangrove, as I said in my presentation, because mangrove is just dealing with the above ground biomass, so the approach that we have been used is similar with the one with other ecosystem type, which is using 2006 IPCC guideline. That soon next year they will be published the refinement of 2019 guideline, IPCC guidelines. And I think just last week there's been a discussion in Australia and Brisbane. I think I'm not there, but there's a discussion about the government exchange, which discussing about the implementation of the country's implementation of 2014 wetland supplement, especially how blue carbons, not just mangrove, but also other blue carbon types that has been incorporated in the greenhouse gas inventory. And in terms of the reporting, measurement reporting and greenhouse gas inventory for especially for mangrove, I've talked about the mangrove because it is the one that has been included in the land-based greenhouse gas inventory. We still use the 2006 PCC guideline. 2014, of course, there will be the area that in the future, for example, when we are thinking that other pools of mangrove ecosystem carbon stock has been considered for future reporting, then 2014 wetland supplement will be used as the basis. And the second question, how the mangroves area, sorry. Huh?
Probably you also addressed a question to Pak Moriono, right, about the above ground carbon. So apologies again for going here and there and running away, but we try to keep it concise and try to accommodate every question.
Sorry, I missed the question. So probably in the next, after lunch, it will be better, because stay foolish is okay, but stay hungry is really torturing me. Yes, thank you.
So logic without logistics doesn't make any sense. So the other question probably as follows to the lunchtime. So apologies again for the timing, and we have a new agenda. We have to be flexible about it. Please, a big round of applause for the speakers. And then the next session is going to be 1:30, so I hope everyone's going to be running to 17th floor before the lunch runs out. Thank you very much for the session.